We're in part 3 of our series, Faithful, all about fueling our faith in an empty world. Again, my name's Josh. Such a great privilege to get to be here with you today and get to share from this space. It's very close to my heart that we see people, and I get to see people within our community growing in their faith in Jesus. I think our world's a better place when people who love Jesus are in the workplace. I think our families are healthier. I think that when our trust in Jesus grows, life just seems to be better for the people around those who follow Jesus. So, looking at this idea of how does faith in Jesus grow is really important. Because some people have been following Jesus for a long time, and some people have been following Jesus for not such a long time. Or some of you may even be looking in, trying to figure out, do you want to follow Jesus? Or perhaps for some, you're sort of wondering if Jesus is still even relevant, and you're starting to lean away, wondering if you should still be engaged. And that's why we're looking at this idea and answering this one question. Well, how does faith in Jesus grow? How do we ensure that our faith continues to grow? And is that something I want to be a part of? So that's what we've been looking at over this series. So last week we looked at the first thing that God uses to grow our faith. We looked at this idea of practical teaching. I challenged everyone to spend 5 days asking this question. I found it very helpful. I forgot to do it on Monday. We should do this, guys. And then on Monday, about after lunch, I went, I forgot to do it. Anyway, so I did it the rest of the week. I found it really helpful to just stop and ask one of these two questions. The questions that I asked was actually the first one, which is, if you chuck it up there, Steph, which is, God, what do you want me to do today? That's the one that I was asking this week. God, what do you want me to do today? And a couple of times, it actually dinged my conscience, and I felt the Holy Spirit just nudging me because I was living my life, and I was about to ignore having a conversation or ignore doing some work that I should be doing, both personally and at work. And I just felt my conscience go, no, God, this is something you want me to do right now. And it sort of dinged my conscience, and I went, hang on, I'm going to step forward into this. So asking those questions was extremely helpful for me. Anyway, so it all comes down to basically, how do we apply the things that we are engaging with? How do we apply the things we're engaging with? So the first thing that God uses to grow our faith is practical teaching. When someone opens up the Bible, or we engage with something from the Bible, and then we put it into practice, and it actually touches our day-to-day living, our faith in Jesus grows. It's almost like we learn something, or someone shows us how it could apply to our lives, and we do it, and then we start to see some change in our life, and we go, wow, this could actually be something that's real. So it doesn't matter if you follow Jesus for 5 minutes or 5 decades. When you read or listen to, or someone opens up the Bible, and then you put it into practice, you have the tough conversation, you say no to yourself, you do something that you feel God has called you to do, even if it's not the easiest thing to do. And then God shows up in your life. Your faith and your trust in Jesus grows. Here's some examples of things that Jesus talks about that we can apply. For example, Jesus talks about worry. So if you're someone who's worried, Jesus actually talks about this. In Matthew 6, 25 to 34, Jesus talks about this idea that if we seek God's business first and let the worries of this life take care of themselves, then we're living for something better. Jesus talks about this. Basically, when you choose to let go of worry and hand what's causing you anxiety over to him, he can meet you in that space. Jesus talks about generosity in Matthew 6, 1 to 4. He talks about when you give to those in need, not if you give to those in need. Jesus assumes you're following me, so when you give to those who are in need. Do it in private so that your giving, so that your reward is in the giving, not in the recognition. Because we all know there's people who talk about, I give, and I like to tell you about it. Jesus says, when you're being generous, just do it. Don't talk about it. Because then your reward is in the generosity itself, not in recognition for being generous. Jesus talks about judging. Don't judge others. In fact, Jesus encourages you, take a look in the mirror. Because if you think you've got time to judge other people, go look at yourself and you'll have no time to judge other people. You'll be working on you the whole time. In fact, when you choose to let go of those thoughts and those diminishing views of other people, and you choose to work on your own faults, rather than trying to worry about the behavior of others, Jesus says you've got enough material to last your lifetime in that space. Now, these things are things we look at and we go, I understand conceptually what's being said there. Don't worry, be generous, don't judge. But just like everything in Jesus' life, says easy, does hard. Because we worry. It's all nice to say, let the worries take care of themselves, Jesus, and cast them onto you, but we still worry. It's nice to say be generous, but then when we receive something that we should be generous with and we go, I could do this and this for me, sometimes it's hard to be generous. Or judging. Everyone, don't judge. Christians should not judge. People who follow Jesus shouldn't judge. Yet how often do we find ourselves looking at the behavior or how someone looks or what someone does, and we start to judge what they do? It says easy, does hard. But when we follow through and we apply it to our life and we cast our worries onto him, we be generous, we don't judge, Jesus meets us in that space, and our faith and our trust in Jesus grows. And the reason I think this is really important, as I said a moment ago, our world is better when people live this way. Our workplaces are calmer. Our families are more secure. Our society in general has more moral fiber, whatever you want to call it. We have more people looking out for people, not just for themselves. Our society gets better and better when people put down me, and they follow Jesus and say, how can I love, serve, and look out for other people? God will grow your faith. And we said it last week, when you be wise, read and apply. Don't just read and go, that's great, and live your life. What happens when you read and apply to your life? God grows our faith. So that's the first thing. Second thing that God uses to grow our faith is all about personal ministry. When you make time in your schedule for other people, you find that God doesn't just change the lives of others, but he also changes our own life as well. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell that was released many years ago, I think in 2008 or something like that. And it's a book called Outliers. Has anyone read it before? It's an interesting book. I'd recommend reading it. When you read a book and you're like, that sounds amazing. And then you go to Google something about it. Everyone's like, this is why this book's wrong. And anyway, it's a very good book. And it talks about the idea that people didn't get to where they are on their own. So this whole thinking around, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, everyone's got the resource to be successful. He actually goes to say that people who are truly successful and people who are successful in life, it's not actually about the individual's effort. He goes and debunks that it's all about the individual's effort. He says that your culture, when you were born, your socioeconomic situation, your family structure, he goes to say that everyone who has ever been successful, there are factors behind that success that they didn't do it on their own. Did you know, this is just interesting, that software giants, Bill Joy, Sun co-founder, Steve Jobs, who founded Apple, the founders of Microsoft, Bill Gates, Paul Allen, Steve Ballmer, these big tech giants, billionaires, they were all born within 3 years of each other. That's interesting, isn't it? They didn't get there on their own. They didn't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a tech. They were all born within 3 years of each other. So Outliers goes and looks at this idea that people didn't just do it on their own. Now, for you and for me, we didn't get to where we are on our own. I didn't get to where I am on my own. And for those of us that say we follow Jesus and we have a faith, our faith didn't develop on its own. The decisions that were made that contributed to where we are in life and in faith are a complex system of history, of people's past engagement in our lives, of people, and in my case and in many of your cases, a lot of people making an intentional decision to say, I'm going to make time in my schedule to help someone else in their faith. You didn't get to where you are all on your own. And in fact, there's a moment in Jesus' life where one person brings what they have to God, and it doesn't just change the life of a few people, it changes the life of thousands. So that's what we're going to look at today. And it's in the gospel or the document called John. So 2,000 years ago, a man named John put pen to paper because his life was so radically transformed by Jesus. He said, I've got to write this down. He was one of Jesus' closest followers. He's one who Jesus loved very much. And he tells the story of Jesus in a way that the other writers don't. He's very imaginative and creative with the way that he tells the life of Jesus. He documents that in one part, Jesus helps a group of Samaritans believe in him. He talks about how Jesus heals people. He talks about how Jesus is going around on the day of rest and he was healing and doing things which the people in charge went, that's not what we do here. And it's in this part of the story of John's gospel where he's been healing on a day that he shouldn't have been healing on that this story takes place. So, people who were nothing like Jesus were really starting to like Jesus. They went, he's healing, he's teaching, he's doing all these cool things, and there's something to what he's on about. And Jesus goes and he heals someone on the day that he shouldn't have healed them, and the people are like, grumble, 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 grumble. So Jesus goes and he retreats. And he goes, you know what, I'm going to go up to the mountainside for a bit and have a nice chance to just relax, debrief with the followers and just hang out for a second. The problem is, because the crowds now like Jesus, they keep going where Jesus is. So Jesus goes and retreats to the mountainside, but who's behind him? A crowd. So the crowd are going up there. So sometime after this, when John chapter 6, 1 to 12, sometime after this, after Jesus was speaking about why he did a miracle on the Jewish day of rest, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed and he had healed the sick. So these people are following Jesus going, we saw you heal, and I'm sick, or my friend is sick, or I need some healing in my life. And they're going, we're following you because you did it before, you can do it for me. So the crowds are really getting into it. They really wanted to see him do something for them. So Jesus goes up to a mountainside and he sat down with his disciples. So it's interesting. Jesus went up to a mountainside again. We talked about last week the idea that mountains being a place of retreat for Jesus. Jesus normally goes up to be alone, to teach, to encourage, to pray, or to send. So Jesus is up on the mountain and he's looking down and he can see there's a crowd. There's a group of people down there. So Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him. So he said to Philip, to one of the people who were following him, and he said, oh my goodness, okay, it's getting late. There's a big crowd down there. We're up the mountainside. There's not a lot of resources around here. It's not like today where if you get a little bit hungry, you can just go through the drive-through, or you can just go down to the Aldi down the road or the Coles over there. They're up, they're isolated, and Jesus is sitting down going, these people need to eat. So he turns to Philip and he says, where are we going to buy bread for everyone? To which Philip's like, why'd you ask me? Like, why am I getting picked on here? Anyway, so this little festival's rocking up. Now, the author does tell us this. He only asked him to test him, which is interesting. So for some reason, in Philip's development of his spiritual journey, of his following of Jesus, he recognized Philip needed to learn something. So he said it to Philip on purpose so that he could test him, because Jesus already knew what he was going to do. And I like that he says he had in mind what he was already going to do. You know, when you read a book and then you watch the movie, sometimes when you watch the movie, because you've read the book, you know some of the motivation in the background that doesn't quite get translated into the film. You know when that happens? You're like, that's a powerful scene, but if you understood the backstory, it's so much more powerful. It's almost like the author's giving us this some backstory to say, Jesus asked Philip to test him, but he already knew what he was going to do. Jesus already had a plan. Jesus wasn't genuinely stumped going, I have no idea. He went, I need to just check out Philip here. So he turns to him, and he asks him that question to test him. Now, Philip weighs up the situation, and he does what any reasonable person does. He makes an observation. He says, it would take more than half a year's wage, and that would only buy enough bread so that everybody could have a bite. And I can imagine Philip saying that last part nice and slow. Jesus, it would take half a year's wage for everyone just to have one bite. To which he's observed the situation. He's basically saying, impossible. This can't happen. And even if we had the resource to do it, too late, too little, too late. Now, Andrew's listening, and he steps in. And I'm not sure as to Andrew's motivation here, but he thinks he has a little bit of an answer. So Andrew speaks up. And Andrew speaks up and says to him, there's a boy here, and he has 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go among so many? Now, I can't imagine what actually happened, but just to try and put a bit of imagination on it, I imagine Jesus has turned to Philip. Philip, what are we going to do here? Philip's like, yeah. And then Andrew's like, oh, I've got an idea. Here's a boy. He has some food. But that's not going to work, is it? It's almost like he says, I've got this boy. He's got some food, but he hasn't got a lot. Now, I think a little bit of Andrew's motivation here is, how are we going to feed the crowds? I don't know. But there's a boy here with enough food to feed us. That's sort of the vibe I'm picking up on. How will the crowds? I don't know, but I've got this. How will it go amongst so many? It can't. All right, well, let's eat then. Anyway, but he comes and he brings the boy and says, here's what we've got. somehow he met this young fella. He found out he had some food. He said, let's bring him to Jesus. This is what we've got. We haven't got half a year's wages. We don't have the time to get that much bread. But what we do have is this: 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. And Jesus was ready. He said, all right, have the people sit down. So everyone listened, right? Because they're there to hear from Jesus to get healed. So Jesus said, get them to sit down. Once word started spreading, Jesus wants you to sit down. Everyone got up, formed themselves, they sat down. There's plenty of grass in that place. They sat down. There were about 5,000 men there, which means when you include women and children, there's a crowd. There's a big crowd. So Jesus took the loaves and he gave thanks. He took the loaves and he gave thanks. He said, thank you for this food. And then he distributed it to everyone who was seated. And this is interesting. They had as much as they wanted. So it wasn't like they passed the bread around and everyone went, a little bit for me, a little bit for me, a little bit for me. If they were hungry, they took. And this was a crowd that are looking for a miracle. So these are people who are going to be hungry. So all of them were able to take as much as they wanted, as much as they needed to have. And Jesus did the same with the fish. When they all had enough to eat, again, they're going to be hungry. They're traveling. They're low socioeconomic, most likely for a majority of them. They just want food, and food is hard to come by. Bam, here's a bunch of food. He said to his disciples, gather everything that's been left over. We don't want anything to go to waste. The meal is over. The people were hungry. Now they're fed. And they're probably thinking to themselves, all right, Jesus, miracle time. But Jesus that's not what he's focusing on at this point in time. What I want us to focus in for just a second is what happened there with Philip and Andrew. So the miracle was amazing. The miracle was impressive. But 2,000 years later, the miracle, I don't know, we've got our food, right? That's not the focus for us. What's interesting, looking from our perspective back to when this story happened, is what happened when Jesus interacted with those 2 disciples, when he interacted with Philip and Andrew. See, a lot of us are like Philip. We come across a situation which is just too big. And it's not that we don't believe something can change in it. It's just that we sit and we observe and we go, that is what it is. What do you do with that? There's many times in my life when you're going through and something happens, a crisis happens, an emergency happens, and you go, I've got faith, and I've got a faith in a Jesus who can do miracles, not just back then, but here and now. But you look at the situation and you just observe and you go, it's too big. It's too much. Where's the resource going to come from? So many of us are like Philip. Some of us are like Andrew. We see what's happening. We see that there's not enough. We see that something needs to change. And we look around and we go, what do we have? What resources are there? And we go and grab what we have and we come to Jesus and say, I know it doesn't answer the whole question. It doesn't meet the whole need. But what about this? What about this? And Andrew just brought the little that he had and offered it up. And Jesus used that to do something amazing. This is what it's like in the faith-building catalyst of personal ministry. It's not about offering up your time or your resources because you have all the answers. It's about bringing what little you have to God. And when I think about what little we have when it comes to the area of time, it's a very tight commodity, isn't it? Time matters. We have limited time. We live in a busy world. But when we take our time and we bring what little we have of it to Jesus and we hand it over to him, he can do something with that. He can do something with that. If we were to compare what Andrew did to our situation today, this is basically a summary of what Andrew did. He said, I'll do what I can do. And all he could do at that point was bring this boy to Jesus. And then Jesus said, well, I can do what I can do. So it's almost like Andrew went, I'm going to do what I can do, and I'm going to trust God that he's going to do what only he can do. And when it comes to our time, and when it comes to serving other people, we come and we offer up what little we have and we say, here, God, I've done what I can do. I've made time. But only you can actually change lives. Last week we talked about practical teaching. Be wise, read and apply. When it comes to personal ministry, the sticky statement for this is making time changes lives. Making time changes lives. When you intentionally take time out of your schedule, when you intentionally take time to use it not for you and what you have going on, but for serving other people, when you make time in your life for others, that's what can lead to lives being changed. Because if you have a faith at all, or if you've been invited to church before, if you have any interaction with people who love Jesus, they have taken time out of their lives for you. And one of the biggest joys that we get to have, for those of us who say I follow Jesus, is we get to take time out of our schedule and we get to love other people. And it's not because we have the answers, it's not because we can meet all their needs, it's not because we've got it all together. We're just offering up the little bit that we have and are allowing God to do what only He can do and for Him to change the lives of other people. When I think about the people in this room and in our church who take time out of their weeks, out of their months, out of their years to go and help with kids' church, they're making time and changing lives. The time of life when you're most likely to follow Jesus is before you're 18. The stats are crazy high. Once you go over 18, the chances of someone in a Western country following Jesus, it goes to under 15%. So people who follow Jesus, a majority of that is when they're young, when they're under 18. We have people right now, I'm looking out there and seeing Julian, one of the young guys, serving in Pebbles, and thinking of the people over in Jam. Those people are out there making time. Like, they could be doing so much more with their Sundays. They could be in here with you, they could be out there doing something else, but they're taking time out of their schedule to serve the next generation. They're making time and they're changing lives. I think about, see a couple of youth leaders over there on a Friday night. You guys could be doing anything you want on your Friday night. Yeah, you take time out of your week to come here and serve the next generation. Thank you for that. It's awesome. You're making time and you're changing lives. I think about the life group leaders that are taking time out of their week to connect with people in their groups. They're making time and changing lives. When we take our time and put time from our schedule into serving other people, it's not because we've got the answers. It's not because we can figure it all out, but we've made time and God does something in that space. For me personally, I've seen this in the Alpha course. I've got to serve for the last 7 weeks alongside 10 others in the Alpha space. And on a Monday night, I'll be honest, it's not easy to get to Alpha. Marnell and I have been like, we've got to get to Alpha. I've got 2 girls doing gymnastics on a Monday night. We're trying to make it all happen, and it's just a lot. But taking time out in that space has been so rewarding. Not because I've done nothing. I've just sat and listened to people. But watching people process and watching people ask big questions and just being available, it's been great. Making time to just see how God can move in other people's lives. Personal ministry is all about making time changes lives. When we put time aside to serve God, God can use what we offer up to change the life of someone else. So here's what I want you to do as we finish off. Is just have a second to think inside your head. Is there time where you are putting aside to serve other people? Some of you can just tick that box. It's a practice, it's a discipline, and your faith continually grows because that is exactly what you do. Isn't that great? Thank you for that. But for some of us, you're sitting there going, I've been through a season, and in that last season, I was really busy. But if I'm honest right now, I could make time. Some of you need to reflect and go, in my previous season, I was not busy. And now I'm very busy. And in fact, some of my time needs to change. You go through ups and downs. When I talk to people about this, there are seasons of your life where you give a lot of time. There are seasons of your life where you give a lot of money. There's seasons of your life where you give a lot of your experience and expertise. There's seasons of your life where you work with just one person, where you work with many people. If you're a uni student, you might have a touch more time at the moment. If you're a retiree, you may have time, or maybe your family's taken all your time. I've learned talking to people who retire, you don't have a lot of spare time. You have a lot more that you can give, and everyone likes to take it. Is that true? Which is good. It's nice to know. I don't want to get to retirement age and sit down all day twiddle my thumbs. And I hear you don't sit down and twiddle your thumbs at all. You guys are more busy than ever. But there are seasons of your life where you have more time to give. There's seasons of your life where you have more finances to give. Seasons of your life where you have more of yourself to give. You can work one-on-one. That's just how it works. So at the moment, for you right now, in your current season, where can you make time? Where can you make time? If making time and taking time out of schedules changes people's lives, not because you've got it all together, but because God can use that in the life of others. Are you at this current season, have you made the right time? Maybe some of you are sitting there going, nah, I could give a bit more time. I'm not talking just here at church, in our community, around, maybe to your family. Maybe you're reflecting going, you know what, my family needs a bit more of my time. Because the first ministry of every person is their family. Like, church is great. I love church, but it's not my first ministry. My first ministry is my family. Some of you, your family has not got the best of you, and you need to go, where can I make time for my family? Where can I make time for this church? Where can I make time for my community? Where can I make time? Because when you offer up what little time you have, like the boy who offered up his little bit of food, I believe that in that, Jesus can multiply it. And when you see that multiplied, when you offer up your time and you see a kid grow in their faith, when you offer up your time and you see a family realize that Jesus can be the center of your life, when you give up your time and see what your hands and your heart and your mind contributed to changed someone's trajectory, it grows your faith. So where can you make time? Where can you make time to help someone's life change? I believe that marriages will be stronger. Relationships will be stronger. Friendships will be stronger. Our world is stronger when we make time and hand that over to Jesus. So, 5 things God uses to grow our faith. The first one, practical teaching. Be wise, read and apply. Actually do it. Don't just grow up here, grow with your whole self. And personal ministry. Making time changes lives. Not because you're great and you've got it all together, but because we're following the one who does hold the world in his hands. And my hope for you is that your faith will grow as you impact the faith of the next generation. Let me pray for you. Heavenly Father, thank you so much that you are with us. No matter our journey, where we've been, where we're going, what's happening, you know us, you love us, you have a plan for our lives. So right now, God, I just want to pray, where can we make time in our lives for you? Where can we make time in our lives to offer up our time to be able to impact the life and the lives of the next generation? Help us this week to see where we can make a difference and allow that to grow our faith as we continue to grow in our trust in you each and every day. In your name and for your glory. Amen.